HIIT training is all the rage right now, and it's in fact entire business models that gyms rely on to bring people into the door. But is it as effective as it claims? And are they even actually doing HIIT training, or are they doing something else that feels like HIIT training? What is up, everybody? Coach Juma here, and today we're going to be breaking down everything about HIIT training, what it is on a biological level, how you can apply it to your workouts, and what most people get wrong when they go through a HIIT workout. The idea of HIIT training is really nice because logically you understand you need to burn more calories to lose more weight. And to burn more calories, you need to do more difficult things. Hence, high intensity workouts should burn more calories. In theory, it all makes sense. Where a lot of people go wrong with this is not understanding what true HIIT training is. Is the HIIT workout that you see on TikTok, on Instagram, actually a HIIT workout, or is it a VIT workout, variable intensity interval training? You'd be surprised to see how many things are labeled as HIIT but aren't actually HIIT. So HIIT is an acronym that stands for high intensity interval training. But not all high intensity workouts and not all interval training workouts are HIIT workouts. I'm not going to go through the history of HIIT training too in depth here, but it's important to understand the context of why it was created and how it became popularized. The origins of true HIIT training comes from the strength and conditioning world, where they're focusing on making athletes bigger, stronger, faster, and more explosive so they can perform better at their sport. So a really easy example is with powerlifters. Powerlifters need to be able to bench press, squat, or deadlift a high 1-rep max. So if they're training to do a 300-pound deadlift, when they're actually doing their training, they're going to be training at a high intensity, which means at a heavy load for short duration of time. They're going to work out near 300 pounds to get better at bench pressing, ultimately improve their performance in their sport. They wouldn't be training 200-pound bench presses for 20 reps because that's not useful to them. It's all about the short bursts of performance that are going to lead to the heavy lifting. Endurance doesn't necessarily help them at that time. A cardio example of this would be a sprinter trying to run a 40-yard dash and beat their speed, right? They're trying to run a 4.5-second 40-yard dash. It doesn't make sense for them to do multiple rounds of 6-second sprints in a 1-minute time frame. That's not going to help them improve their peak performance of a 4.5-second 40-yard dash. They need to improve on the intensity of how fast and how effective they can do that quick athletic feat. And that's the difference between high intensity interval training and high volume interval training. When you're working on maximal output, maximal performance, that is high intensity, both with lifting or with sprinting and other cardiovascular activities. It's about reaching and achieving that peak performance. Whereas the submaximal effort for sustained work is more focused on volume, how much of that activity that you're doing. And I think you can already see the discrepancies with how most people do HIIT training. They're not really focused on the performance and doing as much quality activity as they can. They're focused on doing a lot of tiring activity for longer periods of time. At the biological level, when it comes to high intensity interval training, it's broken down by different energy pathways that your body would take depending on how long it would take for you to perform that task. If you're doing a max effort activity, the highest level of intensity, it's going to last about 0 to 10 seconds. It's going to be impossible for you to maintain your peak sprint speed for longer than 10 seconds. You're ultimately going to slow down after that. And that's because your body switches to a different energy system. It starts off with a phosphagen dominant energy system, which is used to, again, create that maximal output, improve that maximal performance, reach that maximal intensity, and transfers over to a fast glycolytic approach. And the fast glycolytic energy system is ultimately a segue to dominant fast glycolytic system and ultimately aerobic energy system. The first 0 to 10 seconds of activity, that is the highest intensity activity that you can perform because that's the only time you're in that phosphagen energy system. After that, you transfer over to the mix of fast glycolytic and phosphagen for 10 to 30 seconds, where it's still pretty intense, but not maximally intense. And then you go into a dominantly fast glycolytic system for 30 to 120 seconds, so 30 seconds to 2 minutes, until ultimately you get to the aerobic pathway system, which is anything between 2 to 4 minutes. One other thing that a lot of high intensity interval training gets wrong is the rest period after going through the high intensity activity. The most common interval trainings that I've seen are 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, etc., etc. But as we mentioned earlier, the peak high intensity is only 0 to 10 seconds, 15 at the most. So really your working round of high intensity interval training of whatever you're doing should only last 0 to 15 seconds. And then after that, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes for your body to fully recover from that, to reach that peak performance again, to reach that high intensity again. You can shorten the rest period and do another high intensity activity immediately there, but it won't be your peak performance. It'll just feel more exhausting because you're transferring energy systems and you're taking a really short break. So you get the sensation of high intensity without the high intensity benefits of doing the high intensity interval training properly. Now, of course, this is mainly for performance purposes. Whereas for fat loss purposes, you might want to spend a little longer in the interval training between the first two energy pathways. Ideally, your high intensity interval will be between 0 to 30 seconds. And you want to make your rest interval for that 0 to 30 second work at least a 3-to-1 ratio. So for 30 seconds of work, you're going to be doing 90 seconds of rest and repeat. So to phrase this differently, when we're working on high intensity interval training, and you take the appropriate rest between the high intensity intervals, you're going to be burning more calories overall because you're constantly reaching your peak performance, right? You're hitting 90 to 100% intensity every single time you're doing your high intensity interval. So overall, that's going to lead to more calorie burn and more fat burn down the line. If you just go with high volume interval training and you don't rest adequately between the intervals and you're trying to do as much as you can and get yourself as tired as possible, right? Have high perceived intensity as opposed to high true intensity, you're going to slowly but surely burn fewer and fewer calories with each high intensity interval. That's because you're not going to be fully recovered and won't be able to reach that peak performance that you need to get the maximal benefit out of it. So while your effort is important, it's a lot more than that. Your effort and the output for that effort can make a big difference. A really easy example is like if you're going to be working your job and you're working 2 jobs at the same time, but you're still getting paid minimum wage, you're not getting more benefit for working harder. You're just getting the same pay at the end of the day. And it's really the same idea here. It's not just about how much you do or how much you perceive yourself to do. It's the quality of what you're doing and planning it appropriately. So kind of summarizing the difference between HIT and I don't even know what to call it, HVIT, I guess, high volume interval training. The goal of HIT is performance and getting the maximal effort that you can. The goal of HVIT is just the perception of high intensity training and the perception of a higher calorie burn. While doing HIT workouts, you want to be at a constant high performance. You want to be doing your best with each interval that you're getting. And that means following a good time, following consistent reps, following consistent weight that you are using. Whatever it is, you want to maintain that level of intensity. Whereas with HVIT, it doesn't matter about intensity, it just matters about effort. So maybe you use less weight, you get slower over time, you do fewer reps, whatever it is, you're just making sure to get in as much as possible and work as hard as you can, right? It's working harder and not smarter. And as a result of that, your effort will vary depending on how you're feeling. So your output, how much you're doing will vary. Whereas true HIT training, you're constantly at 80, 90, 100% effort, 100% calorie burn for any activity that you're doing for every interval that you're doing. And then the last key difference here is high volume interval training has random rest and working intervals. Whereas with HIT training, you want to have the working intervals anywhere between 0 to 30 seconds, ideally at most 60 seconds, where it's still in the fast glycolytic pathway, and have a work to rest ratio of 1 to 3 or 1 to 2.5. So if you're working for 1 minute, you need 3 minutes of rest. If you're working for 1 minute at minimum, you're going to need 2.5 minutes of rest. The rest doesn't have to be full-on relaxation, it just has to be light activity. So if you're doing sprints for 30 seconds and you need 90 seconds of rest, you can do a light walk at a really low intensity, really low speed, and focus on breathing to fully recover until your next bout of sprints. I hope this cleared up a lot of confusion for you and helped you understand what true HIT training is like and is helping you plan your HIT training more effectively. If this is complicated, but you still want to do HIT training, I got you covered. There are going to be conditioning programs built into the Stupid Fit Pocket Personal Trainer app that is going to be released this winter. You can join the waiting list with the link in the description below so you can get done for you programming, not just in the gym, but also at home and with your cardio right at the palm of your hands. So make sure to join the wait list. Let me know what you learned about this video and if you have any questions about how to apply HIT training to your life. And until next time, stay stupid.